Hey guys, Diana here from Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. Today's episode I am going to be making some trellises. I'm going to be making two different sizes, a 6-foot high trellis and a 4-foot high trellis, and I'll be making two of each of them. One is going to get screwed onto the bed directly, whereas the other one is going to get staked into the ground and leaned up against the backside of my garage. So, the materials. First off, for the shorter 4-foot ones, I only need two 1x2s that are just these 1x2 furring strips that I pretty much use for the majority of my projects here in the garden. And for the larger 6-foot high trellises, I need 3 of them. It's $1.18 a piece. The shorter 4-foot trellis, you're looking at $2.50, and then you're looking at $4 for the higher 6-foot one. Then I'll be using this garden fencing. They do make a couple different versions of this stuff. There's one version that is meant for, I believe, rabbits, where the size of the holes kind of taper a little funky on one side to the other. You most certainly could use that because the majority of these trellises, when they start out at the bottom, the plants don't really grab that much from the bottom, they kind of arc over. So it would totally work, and it's definitely much cheaper than this. This one I paid a little bit more for. It is garden fencing. I want to say it was $67 for a 50-foot roll, but if you were going to be making all of the 6-foot high ones, you'll get about 8 out of that. It works out to be about $8 piece for the netting to put onto those larger trellises, and it's a fairly large trellis, 6 foot high. It's really sturdy, and so yeah, that's my roll. Let's go take a look in the garden and see the area that I'm talking about. I want to take some measurements while I'm out there, and then you can get a better idea of where this is going. I also have 2 of the larger trellises that are already out there, so you'll be able to see what they're going to look like before I actually make the build. Out here I'm going to be putting in another trellis that's just going to bank on the side of this, and I'll be removing these posts that hold this bed together and screwing the trellis to the sides. But basically what happened was, on the opposite side last year we mistakenly planted cucumbers that we thought were squash. The cucumbers did really well on the other side, and as a quick solution I had to throw up some janky looking kind of trellis that was ridiculous. This year I'm going to be building 2 trellises, one for each side, that are going to be about 4 feet in height, and what'll give us an opportunity to have the cucumbers planted on the back side so that they can vine up and over this way, and then still provide enough space in the back behind them for extra room for planting up other things. When I built these beds, I cut a 6-foot picket in half so that the outside edges would become 3 feet, but just to make sure that I get an accurate measurement, because I am going to be screwing the trellis to the sides of these, I'm going to measure again. Also, I'm going to be placing the trellis feet where these posts are, so I'm going to be unscrewing these posts, removing them. It'll actually be sitting on the inside rather than the outside, so I'm going to lose some of my width there anyway, so I need to make sure that I have an accurate measurement. Now this area was our intended area for the cucumbers, and the majority of our cucumbers were here last year. Things that they were on last year were this teepee created out of bamboo, and it was driving me nuts because it looked, in my opinion, not that great. When I knew I could make these trellises for this year, that's kind of what I wanted to do, and before I put in these beans, I went in and built 2 of them. Unfortunately, it was during a period when I was not filming yet, so I'm going to be building 2 more of these trellises here. On to going into the shop and getting started on these trellises. Okay, so after taking my measurements, I'm going to need 2 at 34 3/8, and then because I want it to land at 48 inches in height, I'm going to add 6 inches to where I can bury part of it in the ground. For those 2, I'm going to need 54 inches. I've already gone through, given all of my 1x2s a coat of white primer, and then 2 coats of the cherry reds that I'm using here in the garden. It is much easier to pre-paint the pieces, then assemble, and then you can just go back for your little bits of touch-up. So whenever you're using your equipment and tools, the pre-painted can gum up your blades and your bits and stuff, so you want to keep an eye on that. You're probably going to need to clean your blades and clean your bits off more frequently. Since they are furring strips, you're going to have little problems like this, where I have this missing gouge or this knot that kind of popped out. Fortunately, it falls before the point of where I need to cut. You just want to keep an eye on that. I'm going to measure off my 34 3/8. Whatever's remaining, I'm going to measure that 54 inches from. That knot is going to get in the way either way. Alright, let's go cut up the pieces on the chop saw. The 54-inch pieces are going to be the ones that are getting buried in the ground, so I want to give a pointed end to make it a little easier. Now, my chop saw only goes up to a 50-degree angle, so I'm going to let it take as much as it can. I could cut this on my bandsaw if I wanted a narrower angle, but I think that having made the other ones, it seemed to be just fine. And the next step for me is to measure where this bottom piece is going to land. Giving myself that 6 inches extra, but I just want to make sure that I have an accurate reference point on both sides of the piece. So I'm going to measure at 48 because I want it to be 48 inches sticking out of the ground. Come on now. This is why I hate tape measures. Alright, now all that's left is to stick 2 screws on each end, and then we're ready to go for applying that fencing. I'm going to flip this over and repeat that step, but I want to make sure that my angle point in the same direction on both sides. This garden fencing is really easy to cut and it's soft and pliable. It is measuring at 3 feet in length, so I think I'm going to have to cut off just a little bit of the excess. We'll see here. Let's see what I can get it cropped up. I think it's just slightly over. I hate when that happens. Okay, it's okay. I'm going to get the staple gun out because that's what I'm going to be using to tack this down. Alright, I got my staple gun out and I'm going to just start at one end and make sure that this one end is even so that I'm only cutting one side. And I think it's going to be easier just to get it secured as in an L, you know, one strip this way, one strip that way, then I can deal with cutting off the extra. And I'm just using 5/16 inch staples. You know, it's just enough to hold that tacking down. I haven't seemed to have any problems with those other trellises that have been in the yard for about 6 months, and I haven't had an issue with those. You know, just use the staple size for the job. You know, don't do the whole whatever you've got laying around bit. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and cut away from the roll, and I'm just going to keep this little bit of overage first, decide if it bothers me after I stapled it down, go from there. I'm just using basic wire cutters. I'm going to have to live with that little bit of over at the bottom because I think that this is going to be more secure to leave that edge there rather than snipping it off even, so it's gonna stay. I didn't need to put any braces in the corners of this wood frame because stapling this mesh on is going to lock all of this in. I'm just going to inspect it in any areas that seem a little bit loose as far as where it's pinned around the borders. I'm just going to throw in some staples just to make sure that it's good and secure on there. Like I see one right here that could use an extra piece. Before I get this out into the garden, I am going to go ahead and fill in my holes here with just a little bit of filler. Let me grab the container so you can see it. I'm actually just using spackle. I like to use spackle for things that are painted. It dries a lot faster, I get less shrinkage, and in the case like this, because the piece is getting painted, I don't need to worry about matching wood color. This is is going to get set aside to dry. You know, all this filler is going to need to dry, and I'll probably just move on to constructing the second one of these, and then we'll get started on the 2 larger trellises. So I totally screwed up the measurements for the 4-foot high trellises, and I forgot to deduct the amount I needed for the width of the wood. So I had to go back, take that whole thing apart and chop it down and then refill. So right now I had planned to be at the point where I'd be sanding and retouching up, but that trellis is over there drying. Anyhow, I'm gonna move on to making the larger 6-foot high trellis. So for the 6-foot high trellises, I need 2 pieces at 35 inches in width and then 2 pieces at 7 feet high, both with the angled cut at the bottom for the staking part. I'm going to be doing the same thing for the 6-foot high ones, but in this case I'm going to be cutting them at 7 feet high, mounting that bottom board at the 6-foot marker, and then I will have a foot with that taper of space to tap into the ground and then lean against the wall. So I'm going to go cut up the wood and then I can get started knocking the trellis together. I forgot to mention that I measured these 6-foot high ones in width so that I don't have to cut the roll, because remember I told you that roll was 36, so I measured these so that it lands in length at 36.5 to give me that 1/4 of an inch on each side, so that the wire will just kind of sit just in the center, hopefully. That's the goal. When I went to go recheck my measurements, I did notice that these ones that I had leaning up against the wall, I did not bother to fill in the holes. So in an effort to save some time, I am going to forego that step. With these against the wall, it's hardly noticeable. It makes a lot of sense though to fill the 4-foot high ones since they are kind of sticking out in the middle of the garden. Mainly it's an aesthetic decision. The ones of these that weren't actually filled, they've been there since, gosh, I must have put those in probably sometime in August, I want to say. So it's been several months that they've been out there, and it does not seem to be showing any kind of issue structurally. There's no water damage or anything like that where the hole was piloted and left bare. So I'm just going to go ahead and install this as is into the garden. Whoa, it's a massive amount of ants. Yeah, I really hate these ants. Eek. Ah. Ooh. Oh. It's gross. Look at those ants. Okay guys, so here is a quick shot of the 4 finished large trellises that are now installed, waiting for the cucumbers and whatever's gonna go on over there. And I am done. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you have not done so already, and hope to see you soon. Help to turn it on. More coffee. These staples are not going where they're supposed to. Well, that took far more energy than making the damn thing.